In this section, I'd like to cover some of the core fundamentals of the app designer. And the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the app designer? Well, the app designer is actually a full-blown application development environment. It is used by Syspro developers as a productivity tool on the core product, and it's being made available for use to Syspro users and non-Syspro developers. The app designer harnesses the Syspro user interface controls, its business logic and event handlers, and presents these with a Microsoft scripting language in an easy-to-use interface which generates applications that run in Syspro. As you can imagine, the whole thing is designed to leverage the huge library of the Syspro business logic code base and the user interface controls without the app developer needing to know how they work. So now you can imagine we have a full-blown development environment creating an app. But the big question is, what is an app? Well, an app is the core container that hosts the user interface controls, such as list views, forms, XAML forms, .NET user controls. And with these controls, the app inherits their behaviors. So list views can move columns, sort them, you can move panes around. The scripting engine is a VB scripting engine, which allows the developer to develop its own logic around the user interface that they're using. And the event handler allows events that occur on the user interface to raise an event and run the code that you've actually developed. Special callouts to Syspro core events and business logic allow the app to talk and chatter away to Syspro and get data to and from it. So now we have some idea of what an app is. We now need to understand its key components. We've already described that the app itself is a container for all the other UI controls and things. So first of all, this first step would be to create an app container. This is how the screen would look. And a little bit later on, we'll be going through some of the properties here. And once you've created the app container, the very first thing that is likely to happen is you'd want to create a way to interact with your app. This is typically done via a toolbar, which in this instance, you can see an example of a customer browse and a few checkboxes and things like that. Once you've got a toolbar, you can add different user interface controls. In this example, we have a form with some data here. We've also got a list view, which we can populate with data here. And you can see that each one of these controls will create a brand new window pane, as you would find in typical Syspro applications. The scripting engine sits behind that user interface, waiting for people to either press buttons or enter data into a toolbar or checkboxes and things like that. And the scripting engine itself can use callouts here to talk to either the user interface or to Syspro. And if you need to generate code for calling business objects and things like that, there are also wizards here to help. So how does it all work? We've got these components. We've got an app, we've got a toolbar, we've got windows, we've got scripts like that. So the UI initially is pulled together. Toolbars will go to the top of the screen, and then the individual panes will be positioned where you position them as you were designing your app, just as in standard Syspro. The app will inherit all the Syspro UI functionality, so that this view that you see there will automatically inherit the fact that you can move columns around, you can sort it, you can remove and hide columns and things like that, without having to do anything other than to say it is a list view user interface. So how does it hang together? In this example, for instance, we would enter the customer number here. The user interface would raise an event, a toolbar event in this case, to say to the app designer, somebody had done something on the toolbar. The app designer will pass the event through to the VB script, and the VB script will do some logic. For instance, calling a Syspro business object to say somebody has entered a customer number. I want the customer information from Syspro. Syspro will return that XML data. It will pass it into the VB script. The VB script will extract the data it needs, and it will insert the data either in the form or on the list view. And when it finishes that process, you would probably get something looking like this. It is important to remember that Syspro has a browser interface called Avanti. The app designer can create Avanti web views, which allow us to create apps in the browser. The web view will use the same VB script created within the main app container. If the app is to be run in both standard Syspro and Avanti, then the developer will need to create two UIs. But in doing so, please remember not all controls available in a standard Syspro user interface are available in the Avanti web view. So let's briefly discuss directory structures and file names. The apps must have a 6-character name. This is to fit in with the Syspro programming naming convention and are named as follows. 6-character program name, then we follow by appdesigner.txt, and the actual text file or the program that you are writing is held in the base settings app designer folder. We'll be discussing projects throughout later on in the course, but projects are held in the app designer projects folder, and resources supporting the project, resources other than the actual app, are held in app designer resources. If you are working on a client server installation, note that the apps themselves, the appdesigner.txt files in base settings app designer, are synchronized to the server. This makes sense because they are actual programs and they will be required throughout the client server installation. But the projects and resources folders are not synchronized. We see these as developer specific folders and should remain on the developer client machine. There is extensive documentation and help provided with the application designer. An extensive user guide describes all the user controls, and the appendix includes snippets of VB script which you may find useful as you develop your own code. Pressing F1 anywhere in the app designer launches the standard Syspro context sensitive help, which is extremely useful. And there's also a help panel which you can control whether you display it or not at the bottom of the properties pane. And as you click on each of the properties, you will get a description of what that property does. Shipped with the app designer are a series of sample apps, which are fully working apps that showcase the functionality and coding techniques. And these are extremely useful to have a look at. The code is well documented, and if you have a look at them, you will be able to cut and paste some of the code into your own applications. In summary then, in this section, we have covered an introduction to the app designer, the key components of an app, how the components hang together, the directory and file structure, documentation and help. So with that, let's get cracking with developing our own application.